want to certainly recognize Mr. Hammond, who is with us this morning. Hammond.
How do you spell your first name?
A-M-E-N,
Oh,
like the prayer.
oh, here's, that was, your last name is Todd.
Where are you
That's
from?
Oh,
Are you from Rochester?
Yes, I am.
Oh. He shows up every now and then. Gives me those hostile glares, so I said I better introduce him. All right, well, this will be our last discussion on prisons. This will be a brief class meeting. Afterwards, following your questions or comments, we'll probably have a few minutes to just kind of do whatever you want to do. This will not be a full class day today. Pardon me. Now, human restoration. We've talked about the problems that, in this instance, I've been dealing with men simply because I had never dealt with women in prison. The closer I've gotten to women in prison was, I think I had one after the co-educating of the Albion State Correctional Facility. I had one meeting with the women that they had come in and they had made the separation, but that was all, and that wasn't enough to really gauge anything. But for the most part, it's been men that I counseled in Attica, men that I counseled at Albion. A combination of about 4 years in one place, 5 years in the other, from 1979 until the 80s. So I'm happy to have had that experience because it taught me a great deal about situations concerning persons who are involved traumatically. So now we're going to talk about, we talked about all the problems, we talked about the dangers, we talked about instances where things just did not quite work out right. Well, Ms. Subin, so what we want to do today, thank you. What we want to do today is look at how these lives can actually be salvaged. It's not a given. It is not factual that persons coming out of prison are going to recidivate. That's not quite true. Again, environmental factors play the major role. Family, peer group. Family, peer group. Opportunity. Take advantage of everything. If you have a positive family structure, that is tremendous. If you can create a new peer group, tremendous. A positive peer group, let us say. And if you can deal with whatever is traumatically affecting you, whether it's physical or whether it is mental, then that would be to one's advantage. Taking advantage of the benefits that do exist to help a person to restore themselves in the way that would be, I guess the term that we would use would be holistic survival, but it is possible. And I think that major in all of this is some kind of spiritual transformation. Most particularly in prisons, we've had men to have really found themselves in prison through the teaching of Islam. We've found some men that have really made a change in their lives through the impression that Christianity has had on them. But Christian conversions in prison are very suspicious, simply because I've run into some people in prison who merely verbalize that in order to procure various favors, particularly marriages with women who come in who are easily fooled and duped by these men who are running the game and use whatever connection and contact they can get, generally through religious auspices, to get out of prison, or to find a home when they get out of prison, or to have some immediate sexual access when they get out of prison. There are a number of things, but we're going to talk about the other side of this now, because I have worked with families and I've worked with individuals whom I really feel we're trying to make a difference in terms of recovery and in terms of restoration. So let's deal with this now if we can, just briefly. Now, even though most of us live in a society that is not forgiving, I'm telling you this now, we do not live in a forgiving society. Nothing is forgotten. The old expression, he or she has paid their debt to society, that's nonsense. You might have done the time, but you haven't paid the debt, because the community will never forget, nor will it ever forgive. That's the kind of situation that we're into. When prisons were first established, the first prison in America was down here in Auburn. It was established by the Quakers as a penitentiary, penna, meaning to repent and to be forgiven. Coming back to a society brand new. That was the intention. That has not been the case. Prisons do not force penitence. Prisons do not reform. Prisons are only for correction at their motivation. Correction, whatever that might mean to the prison system. Not what it means to the community, not what it means to certainly inmates. So, we do not live in a society that is forgiving. We have individuals we might have an agency here or there who will promote forgiveness, but reconciliation from ex-offenders with the community, very difficult. But hope still does exist for their transformation into a better, crime-free life. Now, these women and men who suffer from any form of mental stress must be placed in treatment and counseling agencies for those maladies. But that seldom happens. They can be recommended. Again, I'm saying that for women and men on parole, the parole officer is a key person, and will be until they'll be off paper, as they say. But seldom do prisons have the facilities nor the inclusion of committed mental health practitioners who devote themselves to objectively treating luckless patients. But rather, women and men most likely bring their mental health issues home with them from prison. That's what we're seeing. That's what I saw. They just brought them home. They're part of their baggage. Open up their suitcase, first thing pops out, mental health problems. Because they are not tended to correctly. Now, mental health agencies must be certain that every ex-offender program and agency, including parole, including probation agencies, that these agencies must be aware of their accessibility as a treatment facility and receive the ex-offender for treatment of prison trauma, which will endure as long as no treatment is forthcoming. So we can expect that if you don't get any treatment when you get out and you don't seek it, if it's not offered to you, if it's not accessible to you, that thing's going to haunt you until you're put in the ground. It takes a strong man, it takes a strong woman to offset this trauma. Like the woman said was sitting here Monday, trauma simply means trouble. Trouble in mind. So every ex-offender program that the state has, that the parole officer is involved with, that an agency in the community attempts to project, all of these must be made known so that when a person comes out of prison, they will have accessibility to them. One of your papers indicated, somebody wrote in their paper, that where these facilities do exist is money. And most people don't have the money to go. So if I'm a poor ex-offender, I don't have any money. I might get a little something from welfare or something like that. If I don't have any money, or if I had to depend upon somebody else to give me some money, they don't have enough money for me to go to this mental health facility. That costs a whole lot of money. Because once you're in there, or if you go back and forth, it costs money. And if you don't have medical insurance, none of them have that. If you don't have any money, very few have that, then you're still out of luck. This is not a socialist country. So things are not on the house. You pay as you go. That's why I supported Bernie Sanders, because he was socialist oriented. I'm teaching a course on socialism one of these days. Probably won't get anybody to come, because everybody come out and I'm a Democrat. No. But I'm teaching it. Now, finally, there must be the possibility of spiritual reclamation. Always under consideration must be the human possibilities of people who at one time in their life was categorized as a felon. But, beyond all of the ill mistakes that a person makes in life, they will always be a person. They will always have humanity. We look at them as ex-offenders, and though they are no longer encased in a prison, they are now struggling with issues. They struggle with issues of citizenship. They struggle with issues of employment. They struggle with issues of family, restoration, but who also have the unsolved issues of mental anxiety and moral purpose. Moral purpose. Just a thing on this citizenship, the reason why I put that in there, because there have been some very stringent electoral or political limitations placed on people coming out of prison. Driver's license, ooh. Voting, ooh. Now, New York State has made some changes with respect to the voting opportunities, which means that some people who have served a bid can really vote, but they don't know that, simply because when they went to prison, they couldn't vote. Now, it all depends on the crime that if you murdered somebody and you get out of prison, you can't vote. Or one or two other very tough crimes, rape, child abuse. No, you're not about to get you in a voting booth, because you have really contaminated yourself through these type of crimes. But there are other crimes You stick up a bank, you can vote. You know, you're involved in a scandal, you can vote. Embezzlement, you can vote. Stealing something, you can vote. So there are consequences to this. You take a city like New York, when you might have up to 2 to 3% of the population of New York, an ex-offender population, and they don't vote. Well, that's a telling statistic with respect to who wins an election. Though it is, and so it is all over the state, so it is all over this country. But the state is the ones that have the power to alleviate some of the voting strictures that do exist. But nonetheless, it is a problem. Now, among many who are released from prison are those with spiritual potentialities and who have looked introspectively into their own dark mirror of life. Now, at promise here is the creation of a new peer group. I'm talking about a religious institution, Protestant, Jewish, Islamic, a religious institution, if not their communities, but a religious institution is mandated to emphasize the spiritual principles of God's grace, mercy, and forgiveness. I think forgiveness might be the major thing to deal with with respect to people coming out of prison. Forgiveness. You remember Dr. Aaron Wicks, who came here from ABC and gave a very strong presentation. I remember that there was a young man who had gone to prison and did his time. He maxed out, as they say. It was a non-violent crime, but he still had to go to prison for it. But he did his time. Nice fellow, young fellow, still in his 20s, but he got a job at ABC. And he told the truth. He had been to prison. But people who hired him, the employment committee, thought he was still made out of some good stuff, so they hired him. And he was working, doing fine. Came to work with a suit on, like Dr. Wicks, and was involved in some kind of committee that dealt something in the community for ABC. Now, he never lost his job, just to share that with you up front. But nonetheless, they were in a discussion group one time, according to him, and there were some ladies in the group, maybe 10 people, you know, getting ready to discuss things according to your job. And he said something, he made it very like, when I was in prison or something like that. But at break, he said when they broke, and it never had happened until he said that, all the women took their pocketbooks with them. Just that little thing. All the other times they had met and they had a break, the ladies kept their pockets, the ladies didn't take their pockets with them. When they went, they left them on the chair. But after he said that, every single one of them just picked up their purse, zipped it up, and left for the break. So he learned from that people do not forgive. They never absolutely will forget. Society has to change in order, in many instances, society has to change in order to really perceive change in individuals. Well, the same thing with respect to veterans coming home. Now, when I came home from the Korean War, people were very nice, you know, they were very, I didn't have to, my money was no good when I went to a bar. Everybody wanted to buy me a drink, they're fine. But, and I'm 22, I can handle it. But when they came over from Vietnam, it was altogether different. Now, you all weren't born, but Vietnam was the first, probably, major unpopular war that this country had ever gotten. Because they didn't win, number one. They lost the war. We lost the war. But students were protesting the war. The war started actually in 1961, but it didn't really become mobilized until around 1964, 63, late 64. And when the French in 1964 lost to the they were called Indo-Chinese forces, at a place called Du Bien Phu. And they were the communist forces defeated the French army, drove them out of Indochina, which is, by the time the war started with this country, the north was the Viet Cong and the south was Vietnam, but the whole country is called Vietnam. Cambodia on one side, Thailand on the other. But it was such a, woo, body bags were just piling up. Anybody see the movie Platoon? Mm-hmm. Woo, that's pretty true. That's pretty true. If you have a chance to see it, young ladies, on television or something like that, if you can handle it. It's a very long film, but Oliver Stone, you know him? No, he's a movie producer of high rank. Well, he was in Vietnam as a soldier, so he produced that film, a lot of it from his experience. Ms. Dingle.
Just one interesting thing that I have about the Vietnam War. So when I was studying abroad in Vietnam, I went and saw a kind of a war museum, and it was like on the American War, and it was the first war museum that I'd ever seen a conflict with the United States,
Yeah.
not in America. And probably the most interesting thing was that next to all of the exhibits were like plaques that said like, oh, here's this comrade doing this thing, blah blah blah. But there would be like a paragraph in Vietnamese, and then like 2 to 3 sentences in English, and then like maybe a sentence in French. And the complex that we were at it used to be a prison that the French had for the Vietnamese soldiers that they captured. And then when the French were overrun, the Vietnamese took it over, and then they used it against the American soldiers. And so it was like very blatantly, look at how good our comrades were in Vietnamese, and then in English it was like, look, we were good ones. And then in French it was like, go away. And so just like seeing like to the victor go the spoils, but like in a very completely different cultural complex was really interesting.
Yeah, the resentment of the war was so high that people coming home from the war, serving in the military, they were not greeted, they were not welcomed, they were not given any kind of celebratory welcome like it is now, like it has been since then. They were ashamed to say that they were Vietnam veterans. Several of them, many of them I should say, came home addicted because the obtaining of drugs was so easy in Southeast Asia. But that's not the reason why they turned them down, because a lot of the people who were protesting the war didn't look at that part. They just looked at the inhumanity, because they were counting the number of times that the large bombers would fly over North Vietnam and drop bombs. And they would hear politicians who were called hawks in Congress talk about extending the war. But that war got President Johnson out of office and would have gotten Nixon out of office had he stayed. I mean, had the war not ended when it did, but it did end finally in 1974. I have a friend here in this city who did 2 tours in Vietnam, and he said when he came home he was ashamed to put on his uniform because people mocked him and derided him so for being a part of the war. He said he was called a baby killer, and he said that really grabbed him. But you know, we don't have I'm saying all that to say we don't have yet a forgiving society. Not yet. One reason why we don't have a forgiving society is we have a society not only based upon race, but based upon class. You recall that in the recent election, the results, that the Clinton campaign was accused of not addressing the needs of poor white and moderately poor white people the way that the present president, Mr. Trump, did, which meant that there was a major gulf within white society in this country of those who have and those who don't have but think that they should have. And they look to Mr. Trump as the arbiter for them and all of these things. But it just goes to show that we do not have a society that is close to being one. It's still divided. Racially, it's divided. Socially, with respect to this class structure that is becoming more and more evident as we go along. We don't have any Beverly Hillbillies. We don't have any. Poor white people are poor white people. They live in rural areas, they live in areas that are very close to New York, Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee. They're all up in the mountains. They're everywhere, but they get nothing. And as a result of that, they turn to folk heroes who say what they want to hear, whether they do it or not. And it's different from what others who have been in power have done historically. So we just don't have a society that is united. Not at all. Not at all. And a lot of you will find that out when you get out and you start working. You start doing your professional work, you'll find that you'll have all kind of opposition from within your core and from without the core that you find yourself, C-O-R-E, that you find yourself in. Now, let's go back to this so we can finish it up. Spiritual reclamation is the major opponent, opposite of mental health decomposition and recidivism. Once a person is spiritually reclaimed properly, correctly, those other aspects become less of a factor in their lives. And you know, if we really understand that, and if we direct in the correct way those who have in any way been a part of an oppressive system, we could provide, I think, a major impact in transforming such men and women into citizens. I've seen it happen, but I've also seen the opposite far more often than I have. A person who has been truly reclaimed spiritually and socially from that life to this one. All right, questions, comments?
I was going to make a comment because on Monday, Amin and I were talking about the shop camp, and I think that his perspective is a lot different than Dr. what's her name?
Here Monday?
Mrs. Deborah.
Watkins?
Yeah. So I don't know if you wanted to like describe that to the class. I just thought it was an interesting perspective, like from somebody who actually, was a part of the shop camp.
Y'all want to hear?
Yeah.
Do you mind?
Mm.
Okay, so.
That's why you came. I saw you taking notes.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? With the owner of a 2015 gray Honda, license number BLH 9375, parked in the ramp garage. Please return to your vehicle immediately.
Services.
The owner of a 2015 gray Honda, license
So a lot
number
of the things that I've done like on my own.
9375,
Shot
parked
camp.
in the ramp
Okay, you go
garage.
there first.
Please return to your vehicle immediately.
Okay. Shot camp. It could be very traumatic to the person that's in the program. And what I mean by that is that you have these drill instructors, and I'm just gonna be real, a lot of them be saying some very racial epithets to the people that are participating in the program. I heard people being called monkeys, crack babies, throughout the whole time they were there. And a lot of people take it because they know they're going home in 6 months. Now another thing that comes with the 6 months, it's not 6 months, really. You gotta go through reception first. You have to go through this reception process. Sometimes people be like in reception for like 3 months before they actually get to the shot camp. Then when they get to the shot camp, they're still in reception, and they might be there for another month. So that's like 4 months right there. Then once you finally reach the destination, they figure out which shot camp you're going to, which is 5 throughout the state. It's 5 shot camps throughout the state. And once you get to that shot camp, that's when your 6 months start. The actual shot camp. So it don't start as soon as you get in the system. You know, the system processes you first. Then you go to the shot camp. Then once you're at the shot camp, they say very demeaning things to the inmates. Those are the drillers, they're called drill instructors. And they put them through these, this exercise regimens, and some people may come there that's overweight, and all they're thinking about, and that becomes their tokens, the ones that are extremely overweight, because they're like, oh, look how much weight we made this person lose. Like, the program works because this person lost over 100 pounds while being in the program. But the things that they're saying to this person in the process, and what they're enduring during that, it can be very traumatic. You know what I'm saying? And truth be told, the program doesn't fix anything. Because people come home, when you go home, if you still got the same issues that landed you there to begin with, you're gonna end up going back. You know what I mean? So the true thing that really keeps people out of prison is what he was talking about, having a good system in place that's going to support you, like family, resources, or another thing, counselors too. So they're not real counselors in prison. They don't really counsel you. They meet with you for like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and tell you where you're going in the prisons. Like, so when I went through reception, I met a counselor one time, and they told me that they told me about shot camp. Then the second time I came home, and I ended up catching another charge. I went back to prison, and I met another counselor, and they told me what are the programs that are possibly available for me, like KSAT. KSAT is a work release program. I did that the second time. But that's just about it. There's no counseling. Like, there's no therapeutic component about that. People in the prison, in the population, they have a lot of conflicts with other inmates. And they put themselves in certain situations just to get thrown in a box, which is another traumatic experience. I've been in the box. I know personally. It is crazy to be in a small little box. Like, there's one in Monroe County, they call it the shoe. You heard about the shoe down in Monroe County?
Yes.
In the shoe, they have this small white room, and they have this cold air blowing on you 24/7. I had to wrap myself up in the cover because it was cold in there. You know what I mean? And the lights is bright lights like this 24/7. 24/7.
They didn't turn them off at night?
No.
Why?
Because, see, that's the thing about it. They know how inhumane being in a spot like that is.
Yeah.
So people are on suicide watch, so to speak, too, because it's inhumane. They feed you through a slot, and they're giving you food through a little slot or whatever, and you got sheets in there, you got things that you can use that you can kill yourself with. You know what I mean? So there are some people that may take it there. It may drive them so crazy that they'll do something. You know what I mean? So they have to have those lights on to watch them. You know, yeah, but it's ridiculous. Shot camp in particular, it doesn't rehabilitate nobody. In my opinion, I haven't seen anybody get rehabilitated. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people that went through the shot program initially, like the platoon, call it the platoon. We probably started off with like 60 people, we ended up with like less than half of that by the 6 months. Because people were, they got these things called write-ups. You get written up, and you get hit with these points. They have a little point system, and if you get a certain amount of points, you fail your eval for that month. And if you get 3 failed evals, you get kicked out the program. You know what I mean? Or you got people that just like, just get me up out of here. I can't take this, and they just go back to prison, the regular prison population.
I was just gonna ask where did they go?
Yeah, they go to they go into a general population, and they finish their minimum sentence, because that's what it's about. So it's for first-time offenders. First-time offenders, they have to do 1/3 of their time. You know what I mean? Depending on the sentence that they got. Some people might get a flat bid, but typically you get a bid when you get sentenced 1/3 of your time. Like my first sentence was a 1 1/3 for 4 years. And that's another thing. The crime that I committed, if I'd have took it to trial and blue trial, I'd have been facing 8 1/3 to 25 years in prison if I'd have took it to trial. And guess what I did? I sold 2 small bags of crack, 2 little crumbs, $20. And if I'd have took it to trial, I got 8 1/3 to 25 years in prison. But even a 1 1/3 to 4 years is crazy for selling 2 small little crumbs of crack for $20. That's ridiculous.
That they gave us anyways.
And that's another thing too, how that's a whole nother layer, you know. But I want to talk about what you said, because I was listening to what you were saying about those who come out, and it takes a very strong person to go through this if they don't have those support systems in place. I was one of those people. I didn't have none of those support systems in place. So I'm gonna be transparent with y'all, okay? I had to pimp the system. And what I mean by that, with DHS, for instance, initially when I first got out of prison, I still was doing a lot of the things I were doing prior, when I got locked up initially. But there were circumstances I was facing, like responsibilities. I seen my child. I started seeing things a lot more clearer, because when I was in prison, I used to read a lot, and I also, during the time when I was a teenager, I read a lot as well. So a lot of that information I was reading as a teenager, I started reflecting upon as I matured, and it developed me and matured me more. So I started looking at my daughter, and I started seeing the things that she was going through in her home life with her mother. That needed to be corrected. So I took initiative and tried to get custody of her. In the process of that, happening, I went through some things in life that woke me up from getting shot. I got shot 4 times. Got robbed. A whole bunch of other things that occurred that made me like, I gotta change my life around. But when it comes to pimping the system, I got on DHS, Department of Human Services, when I had my daughter. I had custody of my daughter. And what they were trying to get me to do, they were trying to make me do this WEP program, work experience program, right? And what that is to say, they said that you gotta do 35 hours a week and work for WEP. And you gotta do 35 hours a week in WEP work in order to keep your the benefits coming in. And at this time, I'm trying to go to school. I'm like, yo, I gotta go to school, and they're like, no, we don't. You can go to school, but you have to do this 35 hours a week, da 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 da. And it was crazy what they were trying to get me to do. So I pimped the system. What I did, I found somebody in the community that was gonna sign my papers and said that I was working for them while I went to school. And that's exactly what I did the whole time I was in school. The whole entire time. And that's how I got my degree. Because I was not gonna allow them to stop me from being able to move forward. You know, and even when I had to get in school, that was a challenge because of the felonies. I had to write something, and but I got in, and I was able to move forward, you know. So another thing when it comes to the resilience, my therapy was my music. I'm a hip hop artist, I'm a poet. So I was in the studio a lot. I have a catalog of music that's just huge now because that's what I've done to keep me from, you know, doing other crazy things. I vented through my music. It was very therapeutic for me. Also the educational component, obviously, you know, me being in school. If you look at the social determinants of health, for those who are, you know, education plays a big part in that. So that helped. And also, and obviously the responsibility of me being a father. Looking at my daughter and seeing things that she was going through and reflecting on my own life. I'm like, I don't want her to go through this. I want to provide a better opportunity for her because I want to break these chains. I'll call them psychological chains of slavery. And that's what I looked at. I looked at the system as something that was designed to keep me down. It was not my friend, and I had to find a way to defeat it. So I had to, you know, I had to find loopholes. And that's what I did, you know what I mean? And eventually, I dug myself out the hole, and I made it happen. You know what I mean? So, a lot of it came from mentality, resilience, and the resilience came from all those books I read throughout the course of my life until I matured, and that became my foundation to stand on. Because when I went to school, I was out for over 10 years. I didn't know if I was going to be able to perform. And I didn't have the confidence initially. And I told you about the homeless situation I went through. So I was homeless for like a month. I went through a halfway house as well. In the process, in the interim, so I was in a halfway house for 40 days. I come home from the halfway house. My girlfriend at the time was cheating on me. So ended up homeless with my daughter for over a month. Ended up finding housing. By the time I found a housing, my semester was ending, and I made the dean's list in the midst of all of that. So that right there was like the stamp of approval, like you got it. And from there on, I just kept moving, kept pushing, and kept pushing. And I graduated with distinction from MCC, then transferred to Brockport, and you know had a decent GPA there as well, because I still had challenges with my daughter going to school. But that's what built my resilience.
So a lot of people that have seen you around, tell them what you do, your official capacity at the school.
Here?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm the senior health project coordinator for the Office of Mental Health Promotion, and I'm expanding our footprint in the community. You know, I'm trying to create more access for those that's outside of these walls, and let them know that the space is for you. You know, this space belongs to you. We are not the traditional hospital that you would think about, or the traditional institution that you would think of when you think the University of Rochester, because the U of R has a bad reputation in the Rochester community.
I'm glad you said that, because I think all the papers this time around reflected on that somewhat. And so you're right on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's basically what my idea is. And also, you know, I have ideas of creating a non-traditional therapeutic clinical practice that's culturally responsive to the population that I'm targeting. A lot of it has to do with art, you know, like music, poetry, photography, video, among other things that is attractive to the specific population I'm talking about. Yeah, so yeah, that's my thing. I'm also taking on roles that Anne-Marie, she was and she had a lot of responsibilities in the community, but you know she's doing other things, so I'm stepping in those roles as well. So that's it. Initially, I'm just building myself up right now, and just creating the structure around me, so I can start implementing these things and having a call to action behind it.
Well, we do really appreciate your remarks. Very candid. I've never gone through that experience, but I've always thought that it takes a great deal of courage for a person to really admit and to talk about that experience that they had as a guest of the state. So I appreciate you. And we wish you all of the best that can come. But you're a good example. You are, I don't use the word model, I don't like that. I say culture hero to many, through your music and also just through your life, that you can be really a major force in helping families get through certain struggles relative to the incarceration of loved ones. So we thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, it's 10 o'clock. It's pretty good, I would think. So we shall meet again on Monday, and we'll begin talking about missions, missionaries, immigration. And I say missionary, I don't mean religious. Talk about something else. We'll be talking about immigration, because immigration is one of the major things that is being talked about. But thank the Lord that we have people who believe that if they protest against injustice, that in due time that injustice will evaporate. So whatever you do, young people, put yourselves in a position where you will challenge that which you know is unjust. All right. All minds clear? All right. Can I pick up a collection? I can go get my hat. All right. All right.